Okay, so now we are recording, right? Yes, okay, we're recording, we're good to go. Hi, thank you guys again for showing up. And now let me see. Okay. All right. So as I think I've mentioned to everyone, hopefully, as they've been getting in and getting acquainted here, this webinar is 100% free because we know that times are really tough. But if you need, if you would like, we would love to get any donations that you can send over. Those can be sent to the GoFundMe link that is in the chat. If you scroll all the way up into the chat, there's a GoFundMe link, as well as my Venmo. The Venmo eliminates fees, but GoFundMe is, public and really well accepted. And again, there's a suggested donation of $20. So whatever you can give, again, no obligation at all. All of the proceeds that we get are going towards our field vehicle repairs. We have recently purchased a, oh my goodness, I'm not sure if you got, there we go. We have recently purchased a Sprinter van for K9 Conservationist, and it's been going through some rather extensive engine repairs. So any donations that you guys are able to send over are greatly appreciated. If and when that is paid off, we're also going to be getting the dogs some crash-proof crates for the field, as well as healthcare for the dogs, especially as Barley's getting a little bit older. That is something that I'm really trying to pay attention to and make sure that he is able to extend his career as long as he wants it to be. You can type questions into the chat as we go along. I'll be checking that at the end, and we'll have lots of time for Q&A at the end. I'll stay here as long as we need. So just do know that anything you need to have asked, that you need to go ahead and ask, we will answer towards the end. And we will unmute for social time at the end. So if you have a question that you want to be able to ask verbally, or you just have a comment or anything that you want to share later on, just know I will unmute all of us and we can have a little bit more of a social time at the end. And feel free to be casual and comfortable until then. I know it is Friday at 5 o'clock or potentially much later for some of you. So make sure that you're comfortable. I know we're all dealing with plenty of Zoom fatigue. I know I have a little glass of sake, and we want everyone to have a good time as much as possible. Okay. So we'll start out with what is most important and just kind of some fun get to know you stuff with my dogs. So this is Barley. He is a Denver native that I adopted from a shelter when he was 3.5 years old. And I actually adopted him because he's so obsessed with fetch. He also has what is, in my opinion, a perfect personality in that he is very, very friendly and affable and confident. He does a really good job dealing with a lot of different big changes in the world, which is relatively unusual for the Border Collie breed. And he has been working with me as my main canine partner now for a couple of years, and he's trained to find red fox scat, zebra mussels, quagga mussels, black-footed ferrets, and bat carcasses. And he's just a total wonder dog. This is him with a little pile of red fox scat between his paws, showing a perfect alert. And then this is Niffler. He's my puppy. He is about 6 months old. He's an Idaho native. I got him from a breeder in Idaho. And he's just starting his training now. In the last couple weeks, he's finally transitioned. I shouldn't say finally. He's just transitioned from searching for food to starting to search for an odor, which in this case is dead bats. So one of the biggest questions I tend to get at these sorts of presentations is how I got into the field and kind of what my experience was. And I think that can always be really helpful for people who are interested in getting into this field as far as thinking through what trajectories or skills may be helpful for them getting in. I, like many of you, have been a lifelong lover of biology and animal behavior. I grew up on a farm in northern Wisconsin with 40 acres. My dad's a biologist, and we spent our summers chasing dragonflies and catching frogs and all sorts of stuff like that. I was really involved in 4-H with chickens and rabbits, and thought I wanted to be a field biologist. I mean, I still do. So I got a degree in ecology at Colorado College with a really strong emphasis on field work. I was always really determined to get out in the field as much as possible and take classes like ornithology, where we went mist netting for birds, or in our animal ecology class, we went electroshocking for fish. rather than any of the classes that involved a lot of the bench work or, spending time in front of microscopes was just never really my thing. I kind of accidentally became a dog trainer through college. It's a long story, but I lost my work study and ended up getting a job as a dog walker and then realizing I didn't like being a dog walker. So instead, I transitioned over to training the dogs that I was walking, and ultimately realized that I loved dog walking or dog training and fell in love with the behavior side of things and ended up getting a job at an amazing, gigantic animal shelter in Denver shortly after graduating from college, where I worked primarily with aggressive dogs, as well as dogs with serious fear issues. So that was a really cool experience and really helped get me a ton of experience in the behavior training side of things. For the last couple of years, my biggest focus has been on communicating and educating people on dog behavior and behavior issues in particular. So I have a little bit of a trifecta as far as how I got into this field, in that I love biology, training, and communicating about training, which is why one of the first things I did when I started K9 Conservationists is starting to do some of these sorts of webinars. I finally landed a job in the conservation detection dog field in 2019, an absolute dream job where Barley and I got a ton of amazing experience, and I'm really grateful for that. And then we started K9 Conservationists in 2021. So we're now off on our own, doing our own thing. And we'll talk a lot more about how to get into this field, but that's roughly my path as I went on. So the work itself is a mix of non-invasive data collection and dog training. You really have to be good at and comfortable at both, in my experience in this field. I get a lot of interest from dog trainers who may not have a lot of interest in biology, or even biologists who don't have a lot of know-how in dog training. And you can always learn the other half of the skill set that you need, but it is very much so a both and sort of job. The work itself is very target and goal dependent. So what the days of work are going to look like, and the days of actually deploying in the field, which is what we're talking about here. Because when you're not in the field, it looks a lot like a lot of other jobs, where it's a lot of computer time. But the work itself, when you're in the field, is very target and goal dependent. So if, for example, your job is to search for zebra mussels or New Zealand mud snails at a boat ramp during a fishing tournament, you're going to be stationed and just waiting for boats to show up and tracking the boats, being really social with the recreators that are coming by. And that's going to be very different from if you were looking for mountain lion scat in the mountains of Canada, and you're out potentially camping in really, really rugged terrain, walking off trail, spending a lot of time looking at your GPS. And that's also going to look very different from potentially looking for an invasive plant in a prairie in Nebraska. And with that, it's also goal dependent. So is the goal of the study to go out and just get a population estimate, where you just kind of want to find what you find, and then the mathematician side of everything can figure out exactly how to extrapolate that out to figure out how many animals are in an area? Or are you trying to get your hands on every single invasive species in an area, where you actually really do need your dog to be able to find every single one of the animals that's out there, or plants that's out there, in which case your transects are going to be much narrower, and you're going to be taking a lot more care to ensure that your dog is searching every single nook and cranny. The days in the field tend to be early and long, but again, that varies pretty widely depending on the actual environment that you're working in. It tends to be most focused on what works for the dogs temperature-wise, rather than when the animals are most active. There's a lot of multitasking in the field. When I'm out in the field, it looks a lot like I'm walking around with my dog and looking at my GPS, but what I'm actually doing, well, it is that, but it's a lot of making sure that I'm walking in a straight line using my GPS. I'm trying to keep on my transects. I'm keeping an eye on my feet, making sure I don't trip. I'm watching my dog to make sure he's not about to run into any hazards. I'm watching my dog really closely for different changes of behavior or other things that could indicate that he's got some scent that I want to make sure he works, and all sorts of other things. So again, it kind of looks like you're walking with your dogs, but there's actually a lot going on mentally and emotionally for the handler as you're working. And then when you get back from all your long time in the sun and out in the field and hiking up and down these mountains, it's a lot of data entry and dog care. So a lot of times when you're in the field, you may have more than one dog with you. Depends a lot from organization to organization and handler to handler, but you're going to have to take care of those dogs, input data, catch up on email, and all of those other really fun things that we all enjoy about modern work life. One other thing to keep in mind is that there really is never a true off day. Many people in this field end up living with multiple high energy, high drive dogs. And that means that even when you and one of your dogs has worked that day, you're then going to have to spend time exercising and dealing with the other dogs. And even on your weekends, even on Christmas, all of the dogs need all of the care. Everyone here who has a dog already knows all of this, but when your dogs are part of your job and their physical fitness is part of the job, it can just feel a little bit different. And again, depending on organizations that you could end up working for or just your professional goals, you may end up with more dogs than you might have had just as pets, which can lead to you ending up feeling like you're spending a lot more time doing dog care than you had anticipated. In my previous job, I was often fostering other dogs for the organization. And, I've had dogs had diarrhea on my bed. I've had all sorts of things, like that. And there's just really never a true off day in this job. With that said, though, you do tend to have really excellent coworkers. There's something very cool about getting to get up every day, and instead of leaving your dogs behind for work, you get to bring them with you. So how we actually find the right dogs for the job. A lot of you who are listening, I know, have a dog in your home that you're hoping might work out for this job. And you absolutely can just get into this line of work with a dog that you already have in your home. But we'll talk through what the generally successful dogs in this field look like, and then we can see how that may or may not line up with your dogs specifically. The reality is just about any breed technically can do this job, but there are certain physical and behavioral parameters that can get in the way of certain breeds doing this job. I don't expect to ever see a pug or a greyhound doing this line of work. And that's for two very different reasons. Our pugs and other really brachycephalic breeds, or the breeds with the really smooshed faces, are just unlikely to be able to keep up with the physicality of this work. They're going to overheat really quickly and easily. And then on the flip side of it, our dogs like greyhounds and huskies tend to be on the really independent side. They tend to have higher prey drive. They're 100% physically capable of doing the work, but they would be extremely challenging to motivate and kind of control in this sort of field environment. So what we do look for is the number one thing that I personally really care about is having a confident dog who's really optimistic about the world, comfortable moving through the world, and isn't going to be upset by running into, a moose or a horseback rider or a bunch of kids or working around boats. That can vary quite a bit in this field. So that is a little bit of a personal choice for me because I am so extroverted and so communications oriented. There are a lot of dogs that can do this sort of work, but couldn't do other lines of work because they may not be as comfortable around other people or other dogs. Because unlike search and rescue work or some other, again, lines of working dogs, we can set it up so that our dogs don't have to deal with that. So the organization I used to work for had several dogs that were dog aggressive or really fearful of people, and they are able to succeed in this job. However, being healthy is not really something that we're generally going to want to compromise on. We're always looking to make sure that any dogs that we bring into any of the programs for this are dogs that are going to be happy and healthy and comfortable working through long and hard field days for a long time, because training a dog to get ready for this field can take a lot of work. So you wouldn't want a dog that is going to have to retire at age 6 if you can avoid it. We also look for dogs generally that are ball crazy, and that's because dogs that are absolutely obsessed with toys are the easiest to motivate for this sort of work. And generally, they keep their focus for longer in really adverse conditions versus working with a dog for food. The dogs may get full at some point, or the dogs may at some point eventually decide that chasing squirrels sounds like a lot more fun than trying to sniff out Wolverine scat. That obviously depends, and there have been dogs that are successful in this line of work that work for food, but generally we look for dogs with absolute toy craziness. Then the big thing along with that is that we look for dogs that are workaholics. There are plenty of dogs that really enjoy toys, but are not interested in working and searching. So we're looking for dogs that are easy to motivate with the toys, and they're excited about doing the work, because the reality as well is that most of this work for the dog is searching and not finding, and therefore searching, not playing. So when a dog doesn't enjoy the searching aspect of it or the working aspect of it, that can be really challenging for the dog as well. Personally, I also really prefer working with dogs with relatively low prey drive. So that means dogs that are less inclined to attempt to predate on the animals that you may run into anywhere near your study site. There are people who are highly successful with dogs that are highly prey driven. I'm looking at a lot of our German Shepherds and Belgian Malinois in this line of work. Not all of them are problematic, and not but also for me personally, I really prefer working with the Border Collies and the Labradors, where generally genetically they haven't been selected for to complete that predatory sequence and actually potentially harm either our study animal or other animals that end up in our path. That's one of the reasons that you don't tend to see, at least here in the US, in our conservation dog world, you don't see a lot of terriers doing this sort of work. Because kind of genetically, terriers over years and years and generations have been selected to actually independently go find and dispatch prey. So generally, that's just not something we would want, even though they are really great little workers and have a lot of characteristics that make them good for this work. I know conservation dogs in New Zealand actually do use terriers quite a bit, but I don't know as much about that, and they do work with them a little bit differently from how we do here in the US for the most part. So let's talk a little bit about why scientists love conservation detection dogs. Like, I know we've got a really nice mix in our audience here of people who are coming from the dog side and people who are coming from the ecology side. So we'll talk about it from that side of things as well. The dogs are able to search for multiple targets at a time and collect those data non-invasively. So one of the cool things with the dogs is that a lot of times, if you're working in a low find environment, so say you're looking for wolverine scat, it can actually be beneficial to partner with others and have the dog searching for wolverine scat and wolf scat or something like that to help the dog have more successes throughout the day. And then you can also share funding and share grant money. And that so far in the studies that have been done, that does not decrease the efficacy of the dogs at all. And kind of through personal experience, what we found is, especially in those low find environments, where if you're looking for wolverine scat, you could easily search very large areas without finding any. It can actually increase the motivation for the dog if the dog is able to, have more things that they're looking for and more things that they're finding. There's been a ton of research on what detection dogs are able to find, and they've been shown effective in studies where they're searching for plants, animals, insects, pathogens, carcasses, scat, and more. And there have been some really cool studies that have been published where they're able to show that the dogs are able to search for an animal and find the correct animal when you've got two species within the same genus, and one is invasive and one is not. So there was a really cool study with, I believe, anoles coming out of Japan, where the dogs were finding an invasive anole and were successfully ignoring the native one. And similarly, that's been done with a couple different species of plants. And it's just really great that the dogs are able to get down to that species level, even when we've got closely related genera in an area. Our teams really work hard to complete double-blind odor recognition tests prior to fieldwork. That doesn't always happen, but basically the idea there is to make sure that we are setting up blind tests. So I would have a third party, another person, go out there and hide whatever it is we're looking for and not tell me where it is, how many of them there are, or even if there are potentially none. And then they send Barley and I out into an area, or Niffler and I, hopefully one day, to search. And then we can come back and report what it is we found. And then we can say whether or not we have actually successfully completed that test prior to going out and deploying. And that's just really important to make sure that we're well calibrated and actually ready to start taking people's money for the work that we do. Just as one cool, fun little statistic, there was a study in 2014 that found that detection dogs were able to detect bobcat in an area in just 2 days, versus the 7 to 8 weeks that it took for a camera trap to detect that bobcat. So, and that's just important to mention because camera traps in many cases are going to be cheaper than working with a detection dog, but they may take much longer. And in many cases, those costs kind of come out to be similar, kind of depending on those study goals.
Conservationist webinar that she's doing.
Sam, can you go ahead and mute yourself?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, no worries. The other thing that I always like to mention is that our dogs are mobile and hardy, even in challenging field conditions. So as you can see, Barley here is waterproof. And that is something that is relatively unusual for a lot of fancy field instruments. It is really, really nice to have a highly specific detection instrument that can move itself over rugged terrain and that doesn't mind wind or rain or snow or mud. And again, that's just not necessarily true for a lot of other high-level scientific equipment. One of the other really great things about working with conservation detection dogs is that they can be Ambassadogs, as you can see with my little puppy Niffler there. Because the dogs are ready to be Ambassadogs, we work to make sure that they're highly trained and able to work on or off leash for the safety of wildlife and the public. And that makes sure that, you know, we're not in a situation where the conservation detection dog is doing anything that might make the public second guess what's going on with us, as well as the fact that the dog is friendly and interacting well with the donors, school groups, or other education groups with that the dogs are able to interact with. One of the other things that I love, again, being someone who's really interested in communications, is that the dogs can bring media attention to underreported conservation stories. So sometimes it can be hard to get attention for a story about a critically endangered plant or an invasive snail that's, you know, about as big as the head of a pin. But having some really cute dogs that come and do this sort of work can really help get a lot of media attention and help bring donor dollars, as well as, again, that media attention to these sorts of stories. So we'll start out with kind of a broad discussion here of how we train the dogs. We'll get into some more specifics later on about actually starting dogs in this work if listeners are interested in dabbling with their own dogs. At the most basic level, we teach them that the scent equals their ball, or whatever it is that's their absolute favorite thing in the world. So if your dog is a bacon guy, go ahead and use bacon. But again, for most of us, we use toys. You can see how blissed out Barley is here at the end of a training session. We start out with what we call lineups. And these lineups are where we have, as it sounds like, a line of boxes or jars or something else similar, and one of them has the target item in it and the others don't. At the very start, we might only have a single box with that target item in it and then build up from there. We might have 3, then 10. And then basically what we're doing is running the dog down that line. The dog is sniffing, and when the dog runs into the correct box, the correct scent, we're going to then mark and reward them with their toy or ball or whatever it is that they're rewarded with. And then over time, we start teaching the dog to search in more and more challenging environments. We'll continue to use those boxes in many cases to give the dog a visual cue of where they're looking. And we'll start layering in those distractions of potentially having some fox urine in one scent when we're training them to find, again, we'll just keep picking on Wolverine, scat, or having some toys that the dog has played with in the past out when we're actually working on having the dog find their target scent. And just layering in those distractions. I've been known to take my dogs out into the yard when I know that one of my neighbors has a dog that's in heat, and making sure that my dogs are comfortable working around that and seeing how they react to that sort of distraction. Then we start increasing the area that the dog has to search. And that's really important because in a lot of cases, the dogs have to be able to search pretty large areas. You know, we're talking dozens to potentially hundreds of acres. So the dog has to be able to start building its endurance to do these searches in larger and larger areas. And then we reward lots for good work. We make sure that it feels like a game for the dog and that they're always excited for it. So with my puppy Niffler right now, and we're going to talk a lot more about his training as we go on, his training sessions are very short, and actually we do one every couple days right now for the most part, because I want him to look forward to it and be really, really excited for the game. And then we have a good long play session at the end. There was a really cool study that came out a couple years ago that shows that dogs actually retain information better when they have a good play session at the end of some training. There was also around a similar time, there's a study that came out that actually shows that dogs learn better when they don't get trained every day, but actually get trained once a week, which probably just suggests some good latent learning for our dogs. For us, we also are really focused on the humane hierarchy of dog training, which means that we're always focused on making sure that the dog's needs are met and that we're setting them up for success, rewarding a lot with positive reinforcement, rather than jumping to coercing them into anything that they don't want to do or using punishment to stifle behaviors that we don't want to see. And that particularly comes up when we're talking about the off-leash obedience aspect of things. And that takes us into our next segment, which is talking a little bit about wildlife safety, and making sure that our target species or other species in the area is really safe around these dogs, because we are taking these predators, and dogs can be extremely harmful to the environment. We're taking them in and making sure, and we want to make sure that the animals are safe around our conservation dogs. One of the biggest things we do here is, again, working on those off-leash skills. So our dogs know how, we work really hard on recall. We make sure that they're generally staying in sight, although not always, depending on really thick underbrush in certain areas. To search well, the dogs have to be out of sight. We make sure that the dogs also know a flying down, or, we're able to tell them to lie down when they're a couple hundred yards away from us. That can be really helpful if, for example, a horseback rider shows up on the trail and you need to have your dog stay put rather than coming to you past that horse and potentially spooking the horse, or, heaven forbid, something more dangerous like a moose. For the handler, it's also a lot of situational awareness and just making sure that, for example, me here in Montana, as I come down into the wetlands of a given area, I'm thinking moose, I'm thinking bear, I might put my dog back on a long line, which is one of our next steps, and making sure that we are aware of what wildlife may come up in an area. We're thinking about time of year and time of day to make sure that we are not likely to be working near animals when they're at their most active. And then we're using these long lines. You can see them hanging up behind me over there. I have 10, 15, and 30-foot leashes that we get these really nice water repellent, mud repellent leashes to make sure that we can have the dogs on leash as we need and when we need, to make sure that the wildlife is safe and that the dogs are keeping themselves safe, because dogs don't win fights against grizzly bears. We also use muzzles when necessary, as you can see Barley modeling here. So if we're working in an area where, by the nature of the target species that we're working on, the dog has to be coming in close contact with small prey animals, the dogs may be wearing muzzles. So for example, if we're working on finding turtle nests, the dog is probably going to be wearing a muzzle just for the safety of the turtles, the hatchlings, the eggs, any of those sorts of things. So whenever the dog is, again, likely to come into close contact with live animals themselves, we'll just work the dogs wearing a muzzle, and they're still able to smell and pant and do everything comfortably through those muzzles. We also work really hard on distraction proofing and making sure that the dogs are actually capable of working around prey animals, and that even if we couldn't see them because they're off in thick underbrush following a scent cone and a squirrel moves by, the dogs are likely to stay on task versus constantly needing to be recalled and redirected and told to get to work and kind of hassled into it. We want to make sure that the dogs actually really comfortably understand their job and are able to continue working through that without constant micromanagement from us. And that partially comes down to selecting the right dog for the job. There are some dogs where any amount of training is still not likely to perfectly succeed when we're in a really high distraction, high prey animal environment. So again, that's where I really like, our sporting breeds like our labs. As you guys know, I really love my border collies. Even though border collies do tend to be highly reactive to movement and potentially likely to chase, they do tend, any border collie that harmed the lambs was not bred back in their gene pool. So prey drive and predatory behavior just does not tend to be a strong part of their gene pool. And that's really valuable to me. And not all jobs are suited to all dogs. So depending on the dog that there may be some dogs who are perfectly fine conservation dogs, but would not be well suited to searching for live turtles. And on the flip side, just not all jobs are suited to dogs, period. Back when the murder hornets were first a really big news story around this time last year, I guess maybe 14 months ago, I got a bunch of emails from people asking if I was going to train my dogs to go stick their noses in the nests of murder hornets. And I hope that when I say it that way, it's obvious why I would say no. There's no way I'm going to take my extremely valuable best friend and ask him to put his face in a murder hornet nest. So, that might be a job for some sort of really cool, I don't know, mass spectrometer drone that could go and find some murder hornets. I don't think that exists yet, but hopefully it will one day, because again, there are just some jobs where it's just not practical to have a dog go in there, or it's not safe to ask the dog to go in there and do that sort of job. So let's talk a little bit more about starting a new dog in Scentwork. I know that's something that a lot of our listeners are interested in here. And this is going to be kind of a series of tips. So bear with me. And again, this is all recorded and I'm happy to share slides with people. So just go ahead and let me know if that's something that you need. You'll be able to get the recording. Biggest thing here is going to be starting slow and making sure that you keep it fun and low key. We want to make sure that our dogs really enjoy the job. I start out with new dogs generally searching for food in containers. You can skip ahead right to the odor aspect, but I find for a lot of dogs who aren't used to searching, starting out with food is really nice, and you just will have a bunch of boxes with food hidden in them, and the dog gets used to the idea of running around and searching all the boxes and finding food in the boxes. Over time, you start adding in blank boxes that don't have any food in them, so the dog's actually learning to use their nose to tell which boxes to check. And then over time, you might only have one box out of 10 that's got food in them, and the dog is really searching for that food. Over time, you graduate out of the boxes and have the dog really searching an area. But we start out with those containers. We do try really hard to make sure that you're varying your training. So different rooms of the house, maybe your front porch, maybe your front yard, your backyard, your office, an agility ring that you could rent for the day, any of those sorts of things to make sure that your dog really understands that this is a game that can be played anywhere. And again, we're ending our sessions with fun. Even if your dog doesn't like toys and you're not rewarding your dog with toys, at the end, try to reward them with some really good petting or cuddling or personal play, whatever it is that your dog really loves, to make sure that that really short, fun session then has something really, really awesome at the end to make sure that they're looking forward to that. We give lots and lots of breaks to new dogs as well. These searches in the beginning may just be like 10, 20, 30 seconds long, and then we give them a break. And then we go back and do it again. But again, we want to make sure that they're eager for more. So we keep it, I'd rather go too short with too many breaks than too long with too few breaks. For Niffler, I started adding in his target scent when he was about 6 months old and about 2 months into training, which is actually a very similar timeline to when I first trained Barley, even though Barley was 3.5 years old when I started him. I have, in between Barley and Niffler, trained some dogs where we did much, much less searching with food. But for a lot of our really naive puppies or newer dogs, that's about what I have experienced as a pretty natural progression for most of these dogs. We are then going to go ahead and continually increase that search area, which we can do as we're varying where the dog is searching and how the dog is searching. And again, keeping it fun there. The other thing that I want to make sure that we mention, and I'll mention this again towards the end, but if you've got a new dog and you're interested in starting your dog in Scentwork and building up from here, make sure you join our Patreon video analysis club. We have links to that all the way up in the top of the chat if you scroll up to that, and I'll drop it in at the very end again as well, where once a month we will get together and analyze training videos either from myself or people at the highest Patreon level to give lots of feedback and help people create good training plans and troubleshoot, think about what their goals are moving forward. And I think that's going to be really, really helpful for some of you who are hoping to get your dog started in this work. I always like to make sure to mention how my dogs live off duty with me. And this is just for me personally. It varies quite a bit from organization to organization, but it's really, really important to me that we're always focusing on behavioral wellness. My dog's happiness is one of the most important things to their success in this line of work. So we're always thinking about that enrichment and exercise for them. We're giving them the best nutrition I can afford. And then the communication and training has to be really clear and kind in order to be effective. So when we are not deployed for work, we are getting lots of chews. You guys may have heard my dogs working on Kongs at the beginning of this call. We're going for daily off-leash hikes. We're making sure that they're extremely fit and happy and healthy to be ready to work. And the lower stress they are, the more likely they are to succeed in this line of work, I think. Again, that dog happiness and health is priority number one for me. There's in the detection dog world, there's a lot of kind of old dogma, if you forgive the pun, that you need to really limit your dog's happiness in order to have them be successful in this work, because the theory was that if your dog got to sleep on the couch and cuddle with you and play ball in the backyard, then they don't have any motivation to do the job when the job gets hard. And my experience with my dogs has just shown me that that is absolutely not true. Good training and getting the right dog for the job will allow you to give your dog a good life when they're not working and still be really successful at this job. As far as training goes, off-leash skills are a priority for our dogs here, but we are not super strict about obedience beyond kind of basic manners. Don't get into the trash, don't jump up on the guests, don't pull on leash too much, and safety. I don't spend a ton of time really getting my dogs super duper focused on me, super focused on asking me for permission for everything, because I want them to be comfortable working and thinking independently in this line of work. Barley and I have competed in agility, and I haven't found that detrimental, but I do really want to make sure that I'm not being a total drill sergeant with my dogs and having them scared to make their own decisions or work independently, because it's really important that they're able to make their own decisions and work independently in this line of work. So we've got a couple really fun videos of the dogs searching that we're going to watch next. But before that, I want to talk about body language for you. And that's because I want, as we're watching these videos, for each of you to pick a body part or two that you're keeping an eye on and start thinking about how you're watching these dogs work. So let's talk about it. For our newest listeners, I want you guys to think about focusing on the tail. So you're going to be looking at the height of the tail, the wag pattern, and the speed for the most part. You can tell a lot, particularly with Barley. His tail is a very, very obvious sign of how excited he is. And as he gets closer and closer to finding what he's looking for, his tail wag tends to get faster and then slower, and it tends to get more erratic as he gets closer to what he's looking for. So it'll start kind of waving in circles or back and forth really hard, and then it slows down right at the very end. So again, that's a nice one for our newer people to look for, because it's kind of nice and easy to see. For slightly more advanced people, you can start looking at things like nose height and bracketing and crabbing. So nose height is pretty self-explanatory. It's where the dog's nose is in space. And that can tell you a lot about potentially where those hides are. If the dog's nose is kind of continually casting up, that's at least telling you that the odor is moving up high, which could be just something that's happening as the day is heating up and the odor is moving up into the atmosphere. Or it could tell you that potentially your hide is up high in the case of like a bat hibernacula or an invasive epiphyte or something like that, which hopefully if you're looking for epiphytes or bat hibernacula, you're looking for your dog searching up high anyway. The other thing that then bracketing and crabbing. So crabbing is when the dog actually, their back feet are staying in more or less a straight line, but their front feet are kind of pittering and pattering back and forth. That really is starting to tell you that they're starting to try to detail in on where the odor is coming from. Bracketing is similar, but on a larger scale. So if you think we've got an odor cone that might be kind of like this. So where your odor is up here and the scent is coming out like this. The dog bracketing is going to be the dog kind of ping-ponging back and forth along this odor cone to find its target scent. So I hope that makes sense, and you hopefully will get to see that in some of these videos. Another good one for less advanced handlers is going to be looking at the dog's speed and taking note of when the dog speeds up and slows down. A lot of times, as you can see with Barley in this photo here, you can tell he's kind of pushing off with those hind legs and launching into picking up speed. That's usually a sign that he's got some amount of confidence that he's moving in the right direction. And then most dogs will tend to slow down right as they start getting close again, because they really have to start thinking harder about detailing and finding that scent. And as I said, let's have you pick one or two of these to watch for each of these videos. You don't have to tell me about it. This isn't homework, but it does help you get a lot more out of these videos. So this first video, unfortunately, was filmed vertically, but it's of Niffler sourcing some odor, and you can see him do some really lovely problem solving in this video. So hopefully it's not too grainy, and you guys will be able to see what's going. We'll watch it once with just me staying quiet, and then we'll watch again with a little bit more commentary. Search. Catch, catch, hey, catch. Good puppy. All right, so we'll watch it again with a little bit more commentary from me now. Yeah, here we go. Search. So right here, Niffler is actually going back to the bat that he just found. It was really nice that he was able to just dismiss that on his own. I thought I was going to have to tell him to, but he did a great job. And here he's just kind of looking. He hasn't caught any odor yet, as far as I can tell. He picks up some speed as he's backtracking where he knows he's already been, and then he puts his nose down and kind of starts slowing up. You can actually see his stride shortened there. And then here he's doing a little bit of that crabbing where his front feet are moving back and forth a little bit. And he's really detailing. You can see he's moving his nose up and down and all around. And then he does a really nice bit of problem solving here where he comes around the fence. That was a really nice change of direction. Starts lifting his nose up, almost eats the bat. And luckily doesn't. That's the first time he's encountered the bats outside of a cage of some sort where they're generally protected from him. So I'm really happy that he did not eat it. Yeah, that's a really lovely just little search video from my 6-month-old. You can hear him fussing a little bit in the background. They don't like hearing me say search or catch without actually getting to do the thing. So this is a video of Barley. He is very fast.
Kayla, I'm so sorry to interrupt. The videos are really choppy, so it's a little tricky. I don't know if you optimized it for Zoom when you did the share screen. There's a little like optimize for video button.
No, I don't know how to do that. I will.
If you unshare the screen and then you share it again before you click share, there's a checkbox at the bottom that should make it flow a little more nicely.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Thank you for saying that out loud. It looks like I can't see the screen when okay.
Can you come to all my meetings?
Yeah. Okay. So you say in the share screen, optimize for video clip. Great. Do people want me to go ahead and
Yeah, it would be amazing to see that again.
Yes. Okay. So
I don't know if that's just me, so I apologize if it is.
Please restart your audio sharing application, such as the media player after install. Okay. So I'm going to have to Chrome for a second here. Okay. Sorry for the, okay. I'll give that a refresh. Okay. And let's give that another try. Search. Does that look like it's working any better?
Yes, so much better. Thank you.
Oh, great. So that's where that other bat is, which he was able to dismiss on his own. I'm so glad you said something. This is where you see that nice increase in speed, which I'm attributing to just the fact that he knows he's backtracking, not because he's caught scent, although it could be because he does walk himself right into scent. You can see him starting to back up, doing a little bit of crabbing and then detailing here where he's really moving his nose all over the different surfaces. And then again, I'm just so proud of this video where you see him problem solve to go out and around that fence. I really wasn't sure if he was going to be able to do that, picks up his nose, almost eats the bat, and does not. So good puppy. Good puppy. Here we go. Okay, so hopefully that works a little bit better now, and we'll go on over to, oops, we don't need to watch that a fourth time, to Barley working on some distractions. So this is pretty early in Barley learning to find bats, and this is at that kind of distraction phase. So you can see there's a food bowl here. It doesn't have food in it. There's some gum here. We've got a dirty dog towel. We've got a bag of dog treats, some bananagrams, my stinky hiking boots, and I believe that this is the bat, but I'm not 100% sure. So again, I'll watch it not saying anything, and then I'll watch it with some commentary. And if we want, we can watch it in slow-mo because I think it's very short and very fast, if I remember correctly.
Wait, come.
Goes off screen for a minute. There he is. Here we go. Oh, it actually looks like, I'm not sure if I can watch it in, well, I can watch it in slow-mo if I just go to YouTube. So, okay, we'll watch it once with commentary and then we'll go back and watch it in slow-mo just because it's really cool to get to see. So he tried to start searching without a cue, which we're just working on making sure he doesn't do that. You can see how much waggier he is than Niffler. So kind of knowing your dog is really important here. He gives a little double check at that deodorant, which is kind of interesting. Goes off screen. When he comes back on, you'll notice he pauses at that food bowl. And almost, you see him almost bend his elbows and kind of look at me like he was thinking about telling me about it. Did the same thing there. And then you can see he almost does like a handstand because he stops so fast when he hits that bat. So we'll watch it in YouTube just because we can watch it in slow-mo there. If I remember how to do that. There we go. Playback speed, 0.5. All right. You can tell the wind is not pushing that odor from the bat in towards the rest of the distractions, which I had done kind of intentionally. But so you can see all of this here is just him kind of searching around to try to catch that odor. We'll skip the bit where he's off screen. There he comes back in. You can really see how waggy his tail is. He's such a nice, obvious searching dog. He's really lovely for new trainers who are learning body language. Checks that treat bag. And then, yeah, you can see he very nearly does a handstand because he stops so fast. Just lovely work from Mr. Barley. All right.
Hey, I have a question real quick.
Yep, go ahead.
Just a question on why you want to make sure that he doesn't start searching without the cue.
That's just an obedience thing for him at this point. And I do want to make sure that, you know, in some cases we might get out of the truck at work and have to walk a half mile to get to our search area or something. And I just want to make sure he's kind of saving his energy.
Okay, so just more so like with him personally and
yeah, it wouldn't necessarily be a huge deal, but I you know, I want to make sure that he doesn't waste his energy if we've got a bunch of walking to do before we get to wherever it is we're doing the job.
Right on. Cool.
Yeah. And I don't care about that with Niffler at all at this stage. So this is another very fast Barley search. It's a little bit more lifelike in that there aren't as many intentionally placed distractors out here, and it's in much more of a kind of lifelike environment. I mean, everything is a lifelike environment because it's life, but you can still see there's a couple distractions out here where I've got my hiking boots and that same dirty towel out here. And this is another very, very fast search. So we'll probably watch this one in slow-mo as well. There we go. There's his alert. And this is, we're practicing here, having him keep his alert a little bit longer while I go and check whether or not he's actually found what we're looking for. Because that's something that has to be part of our actual field work. I have to be able to walk over and see what he's found and not have him just give up because I'm taking time to walk over there. So we'll watch it again with me talking, and then we'll watch it a third time in slow-mo. And this is just a couple minutes after that first one, so the wind is probably coming from the same direction. So here he's already kind of started to catch that odor, so you can see him doing some really nice bracketing, and now he's into that crabbing mode. You can see his tail wag change, and his behavior changes so fast that I can't even keep up with narrating it. So let's see. We'll go on over into YouTube and watch it in slow-mo and see if I can do a better job of narrating. There we go. And you can see right there, he's already kind of started to catch the odor because he makes a nice sudden behavior change. Another 90-degree turn there. His tail is starting to go in circles here, which is a really good sign from him that he's usually caught odor. And he's starting to do that crabbing where he's picking up one paw and then the other and shifting back and forth. And then he finds the mat and makes his decision to alert. So that one's another really nice short video that just shows him sourcing that odor a little bit more clearly, because he doesn't just run right into the bat like he does in the other video. All right. Oops. So from the handler side of things, as you're thinking about getting started in this line of work, as we've already been talking about, one of the biggest things we can do is play a lot of scent games with your dog and get your dog kind of up to snuff and get your dog ready to do this sort of work. Make sure that you enjoy it and make sure that your dog enjoys it. That's really, really obviously important in this line of work. And then the next biggest thing they're not even, I wouldn't even say that they're at different levels, but they are both really important, is to get involved with local conservation groups. So whether that's the Audubon Society or, a local herpetology club or a weed removal crew, or, even just kind of like a land trust or something like that, get involved and start going to their volunteer days, because you want to get to know the local issues and the local pain points. Then you can show up and you can network and you can show that you're committed, you can show that you're worthy, and you know the local issues, you know the topography, you know the problems that exist. And that is a really, really good way to network your way into finding some of these jobs or positions. Then you can also show off your stuff with education and outreach. So really, again, doing these demonstrations and getting deeply involved and showing that you're ready to put in the hard work, as well as potentially bring more awareness to these conservation topics. Again, I will put in a plug for our training video analysis club over on Patreon, which again, I'll drop a link into at the end once we're kind of starting our Q&A time. So you guys can join that if that's something that you're interested in. You can also follow all of these organizations for job postings, courses, and more. So there's Conservationdogs Collective. They're really fabulous. I mean, all of these are incredibly fabulous organizations. Rogue Detection Teams is planning to start offering courses, I believe in 2021, and they have a really great education and outreach program. Conservation K9 Consultancy, which is in the UK, but they have amazing intensive courses. They're probably the best, as far as I know, for taking coursework in this line of work. Conservation Dogs of Hawaii seems to post a lot of seasonal jobs, so they're a really good one to follow and make sure you're keeping tabs on, particularly if you're interested in moving to Hawaii to find rhinoceros beetles or something like that. And then West Inc. also hires a lot of seasonal handlers. They're mostly doing wind farm bat carcass detection work. They tend to work kind of spring, summer, fall. So their hiring period is over right now, but that is they're another really great organization that does hire every single spring for this line of work. So a really good one to keep an eye on and make sure you're ready to apply for these jobs coming forward. As far as if you weren't to get a job with one of these organizations and wanted to start going at it on your own, here are some other tips for our newish handlers. One of the biggest things is to make sure that you're trading on a wide variety of samples within your target species. So different animals and plants will smell different at different hormonal stages, different growth stages, different times of the year. for animals, depending on what they're eating, whether or not they're pregnant or in heat or any of those sorts of things can all change how they smell. So you want to make sure that you're training on what you want to find and how you want to find it. So if you know that you want your dog to be able to find bat hibernacula that are high up in cracks on cliff sides, you need to make sure that you're training for that, which is not going to look like training to search in a big warehouse in most cases. Depending on how you set up your warehouse, it could work. But you want to make sure that your dog is getting a really good search image, both for the actual odors that you're looking for, which means that you need a wide variety of samples, and the actual places where they're most likely to show up. You'll notice that because Barley and I mostly train looking for things like scat or carcasses right now, or plants, everything is going to be hidden pretty low down. I'm not doing a lot of practice of teaching him to search for things that are hidden 6 feet up, because while that's really cool for competition work, or if we were going to work on bat hibernacula, that's not a skill he needs to work on right now. You can also start out right away working hard on off-leash skills and wildlife interactions with your dog, because your dog is going to be an ambassador in this line of work. So make sure that they are ready for that position, because again, whether you like it or not, once you're in this line of work, your dog is a representative. You can also read the scientific literature on the subject of conservation dogs. We're planning on doing a lot of breakdowns of the different scientific literature around conservation detection dogs on the K9 Conservationists podcast. So you can check that out there if you're not someone who really loves reading abstracts and the methods sections of papers on your weekends, or if you just struggle with paywalls, as I know many of us do. As a new handler, you also need to be prepared for lots of work on safety and travel with your dog. That's something that you can do before you've even started working on the scent work, but make sure that your dog is comfortable sleeping in hotels and going to bathroom on a variety of surfaces and all these other day-to-day things that come with needing to drive. I've had to drive from Missoula, Montana down to Arizona for field work and have to have my dog in the car for hours and hours and then be living out of a trailer with 3 dogs all at the same time. So make sure that sort of thing is something that your dog is comfortable with and that you're comfortable with before you get too far down the line with this sort of work. Another tip as you're kind of working on training, again, I know this is a little bit of a hodgepodge of tips, and again, I'm happy to share this with anyone who needs it, is that overemphasizing your dog's alert, so that's where your dog sits or lies down at the target odor and tells you about it, is often a symptom of not understanding your dog's body language well enough elsewhere. New handlers tend to get really, really hung up on that alert behavior, and a lot of times, again, that's just because they don't know how to read their dogs well enough, so they really need that alert. And that can lead to problems down the line, because really emphasizing your dog's alert behavior really heavily can lead to your dog alerting at times where they haven't actually found the target odor because they think that the alert is the most important part rather than the odor. And we really want odor to be more important. With that, working on blind hides can be really helpful for learning how to read your dog's body language. So that's where, again, someone is hiding something for you, so you don't know where it is. And that's just incredibly valuable to do as much as you can in practice. Keep a training log. That really helps you keep an eye on what's going well and what's not going well in your training. And not all dogs and handlers love this work, and that's okay. So there are other ways that you can be a K9 conservationist without being a conservation detection dog team. So if this line of work just isn't for you, or you don't want to do it full time, or your dog doesn't want to do it full time, that's absolutely okay. And there's still definitely ways that you can get involved and help out as much as possible. And I will give one more plug here for our Patreon video analysis club, where we would be thrilled to help people out through all of these sorts of, these different problems and common hangups in this line of work. We're almost done here, and then we're going to go to questions. So the last thing is, I know a lot of people are interested in ways that they can get involved and help K9 conservationists. And unfortunately, our biggest needs right now are not with new dogs and new handlers. I know that's what everyone wants to be doing, but where we're at right now, I'm not even paying myself, so I would have no idea where to start with bringing on other dogs and handlers. We do definitely need donations, so I've dropped the GoFundMe and Venmo into the chat. I will again. So any of that is accepted and welcome. We also have a new bonfire campaign where you can buy t-shirts from us. Those also give us a pretty hefty donation. So if you're interested in donating by getting yourself something, which I know I'm guilty of, I'll drop the link for that in as well. We are also definitely looking for volunteers with K9 conservationists with experience in a variety of things. We can always use help with social media. Email marketing and fundraising are really, really big things for us right now that we don't have off the ground and could definitely use help with. We are also hopefully working on a course of getting dogs started in this conservation detection dog world. I've been filming almost every single training session I've given Niffler from back when he was a wee 10-week-old puppy to today, and would really love help putting that together into a comprehensive course. And of course, anyone who helped with that would get access to all the course material for free. We're always interested in podcast editing and transcription. We have the K9 Conservationists podcast, and currently we don't have it transcribed. I would love to make that something that would be available for, more accessibility, or just people who prefer to read as their main mode of learning instead of listening. We're always looking for connections and coalition building and grant writing. So if you have any of those skills and would be interested in getting involved, you can definitely reach out to me. Again, unfortunately, right now, we're not looking for new dogs and handlers, but down the line, I'm sure that some of the grants that I'm writing and projects I'm bidding on will require more than one handler and dog. So if that's something you're really interested in, staying in touch and networking with me as much as possible and making sure that you're still on my radar when that happens is going to be the best way to make sure that I'm going to reach out to you when that happens. The reality is, even if I were to come up to a position where I really needed 3 or 4 other handlers, I'm unlikely to just post that on social media. So making sure that we're in touch and I know to go to you when that's something that I need help with and that's something that you want to help with, just making sure you stay on my radar is going to be the best way to do that. So that is the end of the presentation. I know that was quite a bit. It's been an hour. So if anyone needs to get up and stretch or do any of that, go for it. I am going to stop sharing my screen and come back online here. Oops. And if you want to unmute yourselves or anything like that and start conversations, I'm going to do a quick skim through of any of the questions we have. So go ahead and start typing those in as well if you have anything that you wanted to add. And I can send you guys the links for the videos if anyone needs it. How do you train for situations where there won't be a find? That's a really, really good question. And with Barley, I'm starting now about 1 in every 3 searches that we do. I know that there's nothing for him to find. So we practice going out and searching an area that I know he's not going to find anything. And then when we're done, I call him back to me and we still play with his toy a little bit. So he still learns that searching, even if he doesn't find anything, is a good experience and not super frustrating. Again, that's something that once the dog is getting more and more confident, more and more comfortable, and is already kind of addicted to the game, we just start kind of introducing that. And then over time, we just make that more and more common for the dog. So they're more and more used to the concept of not finding anything.
Kayla, are your dogs, are both of them only trained on one source?
No, they're both trained on a variety of different. Well,
okay.
Niffler is not yet, but he will be.
And that's pretty typical with conservation dogs, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, which I know is not typical, particularly in like search and rescue world, but that tends to be kind of a safety thing. You don't want your dog prioritizing dead people and live people.
Exactly.
You really want them to find the live ones first.
Exactly.
So it's a little different.
Okay. Where do you get a lot of your sources from?
And basically I get it from whoever's hired me to do the work.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So that's one of the first questions I have for people if they want to hire me is like, okay, cool. Yeah. Let's do it. But do you have targets that I can practice on? So, and in some cases that might be working with zoo animals or samples from zoos.
Mm-hmm.
Although we try not to do that too much because they often eat different things.
Exactly.
It can be really challenging. So, as much as I say, like train for what you want to find and how you want to find it, sometimes that's just not going to be a possibility. So you do. Anne asked, for dogs that work multiple target odors, do you train different indications? I don't. I have thought about training different search cues for different targets. So, saying bats versus ferrets versus, whatever mussels. I haven't really played around with that enough to know whether or not it's going to work. And, you know, then the tricky thing is, you know, with bats and ferrets and mussels, they're never going to end up in the same place. And that's never going to be something we're trained to find all three of those at the same time. But if I had elk and moose and wolf, and I wanted to train those as three different terms, in theory, I could eventually get hired to find all three at the same time. So I don't quite know what I would tell the dog to look for in that point.
And you would still reward always for if you're out and they do indicate on a different odor than what you're looking for, but it's an odor that they are trained on, then
I would still reward for that. So yeah, if we happened to be out searching for zebra mussels and like a dead bat had hit a power line last night or something, I would totally still reward the dog for finding that.
Okay.
General advice on finding groups to network with, obviously Google, but how to find reputable groups. I find generally just going for, you know, universities, if you've got one in your area, almost all are going to have some sort of something that you can find. The bigger research universities are going to be really great for that. But even the smaller, I went to a really small liberal arts college, and we had a couple professors who I think would have at least known the right people to go for. And then those big national organizations. So, you know, places like the Sierra Club or the Nature Conservancy or the Audubon Society, like we know they're going to be good. Or even like, I know Play Clean Go is a really good one. They do a lot of invasive species and invasive plant stuff. So looking at those big national ones, and then you can always go out from there for the local ones. I so far haven't had a lot of experience with organizations that I would say are bad. But finding those and getting involved with them. What have I found to be the most challenging part of this work for me and Barley? By far the hardest part of this work is when, for me, is when Barley has made an alert and I cannot confirm whether or not he's correct. So there are times where he may have found like a smidgen of dead bat, but I just can't find it. I just can't confirm that he's right. Or when we were doing the black-footed ferret work, like unless I see black-footed ferret scat, or we're lucky enough to have a black-footed ferret chatter at us from its burrow, we can't confirm whether or not it's correct. And it's generally considered policy in this organization, and not in this organization, in this field, to not reward the dog if you can't confirm that they're correct. So that can just, again, be just really, really challenging for me emotionally, because I know my dog has worked really hard. And in theory, if he's found something that was really, really hard to find, and it's just a really small sample, that's exactly when I want to reward him most, because he's found like the smallest, hardest sample that I would have missed as a human searcher, but that's also often the time where I can't. So it's something that I'm really interested in kind of continuing to think through as far as training protocols and making sure that maybe there's a better way to do it. A lot of people will say that, you know, if you know that your dog's training is solid, you should be able to reward your dog when you make an alert. But there's also some really interesting stuff in conservation dog work that's a little different from narcotics or bomb or drug, you know, bomb dogs or those sorts of things, in that we can end up with animals that do coprophagy. So they've eaten the poop of another animal and then pooped it out. And, you know, so if a lynx eats fox scat and you're trying to find fox, and then the lynx poops out the fox scat, is the dog correct or not? Because it's going to look like lynx scat to me, but my dog is going to be alerting to it. And the thing that I don't want to do, and this wouldn't be terrible in this situation, but I wouldn't want to accidentally train my dog to then find lynx scat, which is exactly what would happen if I rewarded him for it. It wouldn't be the end of the world in that particular example, because there's just not that many lynx compared to foxes. But if it were the other way, where if it was I was trying to find lynx scat and a fox had eaten lynx scat and then pooped it out, we're going to have like 100 foxes to every one lynx. So that would really drive up lab costs for my funders and slow down our transects if the dog is finding every single fox scat when we're trying to find lynx. So it's a really, really challenging part of this field that I have not figured out yet. Again, it seems like best practice in the industry is to just not reward if you can't confirm, but that just doesn't feel good.
So how do you currently navigate that? So like if he does and you're not positive, what's your protocol after that?
I gently praise him and we move on. So I don't reward him for it, because that's what I've been taught to do, but it just doesn't feel good. And I'm just not entirely convinced that is like, I don't I hope that 5 or 10 years from now, when I'm asked this question, I'm going to have a better response. I think it's one of the number one things in this field that I just think there's got to be a better way to do it. What has been the most challenging situation? I think, again, it's the situations where the dog has maybe made a couple of alerts in a row and is really starting to get tired and starting to get frustrated. That can be really hard to see. So generally, again, how I mitigate that is I will have targets on me. So I'll have a pocket full of scat or something, obviously like triple bagged. And I will eventually try to put that out in a way that I can reward my dog for something and he can actually find something that I can reward him for. Okay. Do you work specific training or do you do you work scent specific training or use scent conditioning or imprinting? I think, Rachel, I'm going to need you to clarify that a little bit. Are you still here? I am not. I see her still here, but she's muted. Okay, so Rachel, if you want to chime in at some point, let us know. Oh yes, hi.
Because Angle's a little whiny right now, but what I mean is when you do like scent imprinting for like bomb dogs, my cat got in the room. He's like, what? When you do like imprinting for bomb dogs and things, you like train them early to always alert to that same scent. Or if you're doing SAR for a specific like man trailing kind of a scenario, you work specific like here is this person's sock that I
see. Yes.
Follow this trail.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's much more similar to the bomb dog side of things. Although we don't start with like baby puppies the way that you would with potentially bomb dogs. Because like if I were breeding bomb dogs, I would know that like any of the dogs I sell are going to be finding meth probably or heroin. So I could just start training those puppies when they're like 4 weeks old. I know there are some really cool breeders out there that do that sort of thing. And in this line of work, there's no guarantee that like my dog is definitely going to end up finding zebra mussels or something like that. So a lot of times the very first odor that I've trained dogs on has been something that's not even conservation related. So I'll just train them to find like birch essential oil or something. And then we start moving it in. So yeah, it's a little different from trailing or tracking. While in the conservation dog realm, there are some dogs who do that where they'll actually will like track a specific rhino through a national park or something like that. Generally, we're doing more of the air scenting where we train the dog to find something and then just kind of release them to it. And they've been taught to find that thing versus an individual. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense. And then Allison asked, what's the bidding process or securing a contract process? Like what kind of materials are you submitting? Is it videos or a typical grant application? It tends to be more grant-esque. And so far, almost all of the contracts I've gotten have actually been through personal relationships. So I have not had to yet do kind of like a cold call bidding project. I also get a lot of emails from people asking if I'm interested in this sort of work, and then we start a conversation. So it's a lot more of kind of inbound versus outbound marketing, if that's a terminology that you're familiar with. Although I know that a lot of other people do a lot more of the grant bidding process, and that's something that I hope to get into eventually. But honestly, at this point, I'm not a very skilled grant writer and don't have a lot of time for it. Are there conservation dogs that work with a scent track or trail in the way that you would do with specific searches in SAR? There are. It's relatively rare. Again, I know there's some cases of dogs doing it with like individual rhinos or potentially tracking down poachers, but most of the work that I've heard in that in the tracking and trailing side of things has been in Africa. Like in theory, you could do it. I'm just not quite sure what the target species around here in the US may be that you would be interested in doing that with. Have I used a handheld FTIR for the scat finder? No, I have not. What is that?
I guess that was my contribution.
Yeah,
I'm Garrett.
Hi.
Husband. But I work as a chemist, so
cool.
FTIR is Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy. So I know that they have like handheld units, and they can give you like a general sense of what sort of compound you're looking at, and
cool.
compounds give you a different
Oh my
infrared.
God. No, I need one.
Signal.
That sounds.
So yeah, I don't know if you could apply it to the sort of scat inside of scat scenario.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something I'm actually working on. Not that specifically, but I'm working on FTIR quantitation of chemicals. So
yeah. Well, and it's like the scat within a scat sort of situation. I'm honestly not even sure how you would deal with that, because there have been some really interesting studies showing that, like, depending on where you collect your sample from that, it would show up as lynx versus fox. And yeah, I don't know if we're ever really going to solve that particular instance, but for instances where a lot of times visually, red fox and bobcat scat can look really, really similar, even if they haven't been engaging in coprophagy. Like, it would be potentially really useful for that. I'm not sure. I would imagine it can tell the difference between the two. That would be a really interesting thing to examine. Mentioned that dogs can be hard on the environment that they're searching in, or the environment in general. And I meant more in that way as far as like dogs in general versus conservation dogs. Generally, as conservation dog handlers, I haven't seen a lot of negative impacts between the dogs and the environment, but we're making sure we're picking up the dog poop. We're making sure we're cleaning the dogs of burrs and seeds at the end of the session to make sure that we're not accidentally bringing an invasive species from one area to another. And we're making sure that they're not chasing wildlife. So, generally when we talk about dogs being hard on the environment, it's because of those different things. Dogs are really big culprits of moving disease and invasive species around as they recreate, or harassing wildlife. So, it's really important to me to make sure that as a handler and for my dogs, that we're being really good ambassadors on that end of things. Back to the question about where you get your source. If you start doing bat carcasses for a company which hired you, how long does it take for the dog to learn the new scent? Barley, at this point, because I've found that now he knows how to find new scents. He's like learned the game of learning how to search. Those videos that you saw of him searching, I think we're about 2 weeks into him learning to search for bats. And we're about a month and a half after I took those videos, so about 6 weeks later, and he's now comfortably searching like 5 to 10 acres for bats. So a couple weeks. It takes longer in the beginning, and it takes longer for some dogs than others. But especially in the beginning, when they're just kind of learning the searching game, and they're learning the searching game and learning the odor, then it looks like the odor is taking longer, but it's actually because they're learning both things at the same time. Versus at this point, Barley really knows how to search. All I'm doing is asking him to look for something different, so it just doesn't take all that long anymore. So I got my start with Working Dogs for Conservation. I worked with them for about 1.5 years. They're also based here in Missoula. Okay. Maria's thinking about scat and scat. Yes, so I think you could, in theory, you could kind of mix those scats together and then proof the dog off of those mixed scats if you really didn't want to. That's the sort of thing that, again, would probably be pretty species dependent. So if you knew that was a really big issue with your target species, that might be worth doing. But in a lot of cases, it's just not. I don't think it's likely enough that it's a huge issue. But there was a really interesting paper that came out that I can try to dig up and send everyone. Because I think I have all of your emails, maybe, about kind of that topic. And I don't think they looked at how common it is in the wild, but they did look at, basically they had a bunch of captive coyotes and they fed them glitter and some other things to make sure you could actually visually tell the difference. And then started seeing like how the detection dogs reacted to different combinations of like, if a mountain lion urinated on coyote scat, how did the dog react to that? If there'd been coprophagy, how did they react to that? If it had just been mouthed and then moved, how did they react to that? And I don't have all those data right in front of me, or their results right in front of me. But yeah, I think that paper also had some interesting ideas for how to deal with those sorts of problems going forward. And they are, again, pretty species dependent as far as whether or not that's a huge risk, because some animals just don't engage in a lot of that, and others, it's a big thing for them. So Michelle is asking, do you decide on the type of material like scat or urine based on what you're most likely to find? She's thinking like with coyote, urine would be smarter in comparison to scat due to the amount of that they pee while they're moving. Super curious about the general answer, but thinking for coyotes. So generally, because the goal is to be able to collect a sample, we're going to be looking for a scat. I'm not 100% sure what we could do with urine, because a lot of times the goal is to like get that scat and then do genetic analysis to see how many individuals are in an area or what they're eating, or hormone analysis or those sorts of things. And I'm not sure if you could collect that urine. It would be really hard to confirm whether or not the dog is correct. And I'm not sure if you can get as much information from the urine, but that's like I genuinely don't know. So yeah, generally it's going to be scat. With animals, they're finding scat or the live animals themselves. I don't know of anyone who's done urine or, like hair or other sign like that. Okay. Allison asks, does Barley have a resume, or do I keep his stats on his rate and history? That's a great idea. I should put together a little resume or a CV for him. And I think going forward, now that I'm on my own, we haven't yet deployed. Since we've been on our own, I do think I'm going to keep stats on kind of his rate and his history and, all his stats as far as, I know how many species he's been trained on. I know how many days in the field he's done. I know how many people he's performed in front of, but I don't know how many finds he's actually made. So, hopefully that would be a cool thing to keep track of. It's definitely something I wanted to keep track of for the website, because I'm one of those people who loves putting numbers up on websites and little ticking things and those sorts of graphics. Allison just says, thank you for walking miles looking for invasive species and rare species. And yeah, oh my gosh, it is so nice I have a GPS collar for Barley, and I can put it on him when he's searching, and I can see that like I've walked like 9 miles or 9 kilometers actually, we'll say, and he's done like 30 kilometers, and it's just like, wow, my life is so much easier with the dog. It's so nice. And we're picturing the cutest Barley resume now. So yeah, I think I'm here as long as people need, but I know a lot of us are heading out. So thank you guys so much for being here. If you're interested in kind of staying in touch, you can just DM me your email address, and I'll start putting together an email list. We don't even have one yet. And be sure to keep in touch with you. You guys can also definitely follow us on Instagram, and that's probably where I'm most active. But we also, we have like a Facebook and a TikTok, and then that the K9 Conservationists podcast is going to be a really good free place to continue learning with us. And Jenny asks, do we have a newsletter? We don't yet, but I do intend to start putting one together. So if you send me your email address now, I will make sure that that we're sharing those sorts of things. And when I do have a newsletter, you will end up on it. So yeah, and again, if you guys need to unmute yourselves or anything and just want to hang out for a little bit, I'm here for at least another half hour, and then I do have to go eat dinner and meet up with a friend, hopefully, now that I'm vaccinated. So, and I'll stop our recording at this point too, if I can figure that out.